Hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of our Systems Biology podcast. In this podcast, we host people from academia as well as from industry who are trying to integrate mathematics, physics, computing, data analytics with life sciences to understand living system. Today, our guest is Dr. Rukmini. She is the chief scientist as well as the founder of Vantage Research. This is a consulting firm which is helping biopharmaceutical companies through mathematical modeling and quantitative analysis. Particularly, they work in the area of quantitative systems pharmacology. They build mechanistic pharmacokinetic pharmacodynamic model. They are helping pharma companies to go through mechanistic drug development ideas. So welcome Rukmini to our podcast. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Dr. Bose, for inviting me. I'm really excited that such a podcast exists, and thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, so let's start with the key question. Rukmini, you did BSc in physics, so by training, actually, you're a physicist. Uh, then you did MSc in physics, that too also from IIT Madras. Then, like many other bright students, physics, particularly in India, you moved abroad and did a PhD from University of Pittsburgh. And there, the problem may not be exactly physics, but it's still rigorous mathematical analysis. You create a mathematical model for a particular biological problem, and then you briefly work in industries also. So far, so the normal stories that I see among my students across, even when I was a student, many of my friends had the same journey. But something changed. You decided at one point of your career that you want to come back and start a company. You want to become an entrepreneur. And I think in 2013, I believe, you started this Vantage Research. Vantage Research is a consulting firm. So it is, anyway, in our language today, it's a startup. But it is not a mass market product maker startup. It is not a IT service ID also, right? It creates mathematical model. It's consult biopharma industry through quantitative analysis of data, creating model, and so it's a very niche area. It is not a, usual startups that we are seeing all around us. So my first question would be, and I'm sure many of our audience would be eager to know that what actually changed, how you changed this gear, and then when you thought of creating a company, a firm, then why such a niche area to work with?
Excellent question. And maybe the way I'll frame it, and you gave a nice overview of my career, and the way I will frame it is, at many points in my career, there were various paths I could take. So it was a cumulative journey to make that switch to starting a company versus something just happened in one time. So let me explain a little bit, right? So, right out of 12th, I think I graduated in the mid 90s, and at that time, all the smart kids were going to do engineering. And at that time, I had an option, and I was very idealistic. And I said, physics is where I'll really learn about the universe. So I was very excited to do physics. So after doing my BSc and MSc in physics, even when I went for a PhD, I thought I would do theoretical physics. There was a very good GR and high energy group in Pittsburgh. So I thought I'd work with those folks. But again, there was a fork in the road. The fork in the road was whether to do theoretical physics or something applied like computational biology, because there was a very exciting computational biology group in the maths department in Pittsburgh as well. So again, there was a fork on the road where I could do one thing or the other thing, and then I chose to do computational biology. At the end of my PhD as well, there is another fork in the road. It's possible that I could have gone on to do a postdoc, academic position, and gone down that track. But I really felt the pull of wanting to do something kind of practical and quote unquote in the real world. So at that point, I made the choice to go work in a consulting company. This consulting company is very similar to I did very similar things to what we do at Vantage today. It was a mathematical modeling company supporting drug development. So I worked in that company for about 7 years in California. And then again, there was an option. I could have continued my career in the US or chosen to come back to India. And at that time, I was very tempted to come back home. I had small children. So I really felt like coming back home. So that was not a career motivated move, but I came back to Chennai, which is my home city. Once in Chennai, I would say that my journey into entrepreneurship is accidental. I am an accidental entrepreneur. I came back to Chennai and I started being an independent consultant. The same expertise that I had modeling for pharma, I started to do it by myself as an independent consultant, and I kept getting more and more work. So then, a co-founder and I, and more a business type person and me a science type person, we then founded Vantage. So, I know many of your listeners are very young, and when you see somebody old like me who's spent 25 years in a career, you may think that at every point I knew exactly what I was doing, and there was some clear signs. But I can reassure you that when I was 20, I had no idea that this is how my career would go. And at each time, I took the option which seemed sensible, which seemed exciting. Actually, more than sensible, which seemed exciting, which really made me excited about wanting to go to work every day. So I picked that option, and I'm grateful that it has worked out very well.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You actually hammered two very important points, that the fork in your journey, and sometimes you actually take a chance, although you are not very clear about what is in the future, right? So all
Correct.
of us, even the youngsters that you are talking of, as we move in our journey, we go through these forks. Your society as a whole try to push you, or sometimes we are also scared that no, I will take the beaten path only because my cousin, brother, friend has taken. But sometimes
Exactly.
maybe like you, it is better to jump with a leap of faith. That okay,
Correct.
let's see, right? Let's try this part there. That's good. Actually, at the very beginning, you hammered that. That's very important. I think all of us have to, not just youngster for us, also at this age also. You never know where a
Correct.
part comes, right? So coming back from life's lesson to the basic question of this, you essentially build so-called mathematical models,
Mm-hmm.
right? And okay, if anybody who has studied physics, engineering, for us, we understand what mathematical models are.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody studying science in 12th standard has at least made a mathematical model of a projectile. So we know the
Mm-hmm.
kinematics and all these things. So it is very clear in physics and engineering what we mean by mathematical model. But for many of our listeners, it is not always clear what do you mean by mathematical models, particularly in biology. I'm sure there are hundreds of different types of mathematical models, but if you can pick up one or two which you have worked or you are working on, and in a simple way, if you can explain what do you mean by mathematical model in biology,
Yeah.
how important the most one, how that math is helping in life science.
Yeah, excellent question. So, again, I'll go back to kind of how we world view and the frameworks we're given when we're very young, right? So, often when you're in 10th standard, they say, oh, you can either do maths and computer science or you can do biology and chemistry, as though those two are very different things which are very siloed or orthogonal. But in real life, it doesn't work like that. Quantitative techniques are used in many disciplines, all the way from sociology and archaeology to biology. There are quantitative approaches being used whenever there is data, whenever we want to make sense of a system, in an integrated quantitative manner. In biology, and biology is again a very big umbrella, you can think of academic basic science biology, where we're really trying to understand how physiology or botany works. There is also life science and healthcare, where based on the physiology, how do we want to manipulate it, broadly, that's also comes in the biology umbrella, and all the way up to epidemiology and things like that. So, like many disciplines, wherever there's data, statistical models play a very big role. Biostats is a very big discipline. There are a lot of data can be generated from biological systems. This is your genetic, genomic, proteomic, etc. data, and the discipline of trying to kind of make sense of all of that data using stats and ML, etc., is bioinformatics. And while there are a lot of approaches like this, the kind of modeling that I work on is maybe what engineers will classically think of as dynamical systems model or controls type models. So these are generally differential equation models. Sometimes they can be stochastic, very often they're not, very often they're just simple ordinary differential equations. And what sorts of applications can there be? I think a lot of people that have done a dynamical systems course may remember the Lotka-Volterra population model, right? So there is a fox and a rabbit, and then how do they both interact? They both have certain growth rates, and the fox can eat the rabbit, and the rabbit can grow when it sees a lot of grass. So you can think of this as a highly simplified ecological system, and there are formal mathematical models which describe what happens. What happens, when there is a little bit of a cycle, and when there's a lot of foxes, the rabbit population comes down, and the fox population comes down, and then the rabbit population goes up. So there's all kinds of theoretical frameworks that you can apply to biological systems and use ordinary differential equations to explain and run simulations on these systems. The kind of models that I work on are very similar in the sense they're differential equation models, but we capture physiological systems. Only because some of you may go back and look for these things in PubMed, etc. So I'll ask you to look for something called the Bergman model of glucose and insulin dynamics. So a lot of the work that I do is, kind of similar to what you will read in that model. So that's a model of how does glucose vary in the body. So, as you may all know, when you eat a meal, the glucose in your blood, the plasma glucose goes up, and many people unfortunately are very familiar with diabetes. But when glucose goes up in the blood, there is another hormone called insulin, which is released in response to this increase in glucose. And if you're healthy, the insulin makes sure that the glucose is taken away from the plasma or from the blood and put away where it's supposed to be in storage in the body. So if you have a mathematical mind or an engineering mindset, you can see that this is kind of a negative feedback loop, and there is a certain dynamics and there is a certain perturbation with the food, and you can kind of track how the glucose varies. And sometimes when people are not healthy and they have diabetes, maybe they don't have sufficient insulin. So then you can start asking questions. Okay, so with that, how do I supplement their native insulin with exogenous or outside insulin? So that second example that I gave, which is the Bergman model, that's the kind of models of physiology that I work on. The field is generally called quantitative systems pharmacology, and it's often these models are used in drug development to make better decisions about how to dose, what patients to dose, etc.
Okay, that's very interesting. What I will do when I edit the video, I'll possibly put that link to that paper, right? So the students can go back and check. So as you said, these are OD based model, and you eventually move to this diabetes, which is a very well-known disease. So I was looking into your PhD thesis, and I realized that you work on acute inflammation, capturing the behavior of that, right? So can you tell us about that work, particularly what is acute inflammation? And why we need mathematical models there, right? And what sort of models you did there. It is a long story, I think, old story, but still, I hope you must
Of
be
course,
close to
it's
your heart
always.
because it is a PhD thesis.
No, 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 not at all. It's always interesting, and I really loved the time that I was there in my PhD. It's always challenging for those of you who are in the middle of your PhD and feel, the pressure of it. It's a lot of pressure, but stick with it because when you look back, you'll realize that that's the time that you've learned a lot. Like a lot of things in life, I think the reason I started working on acute inflammation was quite by chance. I was working with a professor in the maths department, and this is in the University of Pittsburgh. And he had a friend who was a critical care physician in the University of Pittsburgh Medical School. So Pitt has a very good medical school. And so, as my advisor and his friend started talking, he was talking about the problem that doctors in the ICU or ERs they face a lot. So when we think about COVID, or when you think about people who go into the ER after some traumatic injury like an accident or something like that, we say, oh, they went to the, or they go after an infection, like they have tuberculosis, COVID, any of those things. If they go to the hospital, We know that they often struggle in the ICU, and then many people die. Oftentimes, the reason we lose lives in the ER is not because of the original injury or the original infection. It's because our immune systems sort of overreact to this original instigation, and they go into a state called sepsis, or sometimes it's called shock. So, this is a very classic thing that happens in hospitals. And once you're in sepsis, for those in dynamical systems, you can think of it as another steady state. Your body is in a healthy steady state, and then if it goes to a septic steady state, it's very hard for you to pull it back and make the body healthy again. Like I said, your COVID may have been cured, your tuberculosis may have been cured, your original instigator of the immune response would have been gone, but your immune system is stuck in a hyper responsive mode. To get into a little bit more kind of the engineering or design thinking here, this is a system with a lot of feedback and a lot of redundancy. So there are multiple proteins in cells. Many of you may have heard of cells like T cells, B cells, macrophages, neutrophils. So these are all immune cells which are really have evolved to really attack any invader to the body. And when these invaders come and they amp up their response, they find it very hard to turn it back down. Now, because the response is very high, there is a lot of what we think of as collateral damage in the body. Your regular healthy tissue also gets affected. Your blood pressure comes down because the blood vessels dilate so that these cells can reach the part quickly. So, because of all that, that condition, which is pretty well characterized and been studied for many years, is called sepsis, and it's a thing that doctors really face. So again, coming back to my PhD, my advisor and his friend were talking about this, and as you can tell, there's a lot of interesting mathematical concepts that you can talk about. And then it gets more interesting because if you think of all of these immune players, the therapies against sepsis are often attacking one or other of these immune players. So there is a protein called, or a hormone called TNF alpha. There is another thing called IL-6. So people, when they want to modulate sepsis and make sure people come back from there to a healthy state, they put in medicines which kind of bring down these cytokines or these proteins. So the hope was, if we come up with a mathematical model of sepsis, we can try out various therapies. We can try out combination of these therapies. We can ask the question, when should therapies be given? Should it be given 4 5 days after the patient comes in, or even on the first day itself? So these are the kinds of questions that we were hoping to answer using a mathematical model, and that's kind of the motivation of why I did that for my PhD.
Yeah, that's very brief but very interesting introduction to that. See, you mentioned that actually this whole thing involved multiple feedbacks, many, maybe hundreds of molecules from which you may have distilled and created the model using for you. So, when you interact with biologists who are primarily trained in experimental biology, handling complexity, biologists learn very early in their career because they know they cannot control. There are hundreds of molecules. Maybe the textbook says they are in the particular transcription, there are 10 molecules, but hidden there may be hundreds actually playing the game, right? When you do cell culture, you know what to control, but you also know hundreds of things are there which is not in your control. You don't even know them. So in general, people who are classically trained in biology, particularly experimental biology, they always have this opinion that see biology is messy. It's very complicated, right? Your models are very simple, and so essentially your models are not useful. That's the logic, and it is essentially an academic fad that you are doing. Right. So, but when I sit with you and discuss, and when I know your company's profile, see, for you, it is not a fact. This is the mathematical model, is the product that you are giving to your client, right? So, you must have a different perspective. You must have a different experience as a whole, right? So, I have two questions here. One, that do you think that mathematical models, whatever way it is, not data analysis, mathematical models, the way you create models, right? Something like that is really helping us to understand biological problem much better nowadays. That's the first question. What is your experience from the industry and consulting experience, not from academia? And the second thing is, do you think that in industry, life science industry, right, is trying to integrate more and more mathematical modeling and relying on that as important as experimental biology or not.
So excellent questions again. The skepticism of maths and biology, I have seen it a lot in my career, though, more and more, I feel like more biologists are kind of exposed to what modeling can do. They're exposed to sort of useful models which they have seen otherwise. So, what I will agree, right? Biology is very complex. So the goal of modeling here is not to come up with a model which is correct to the sixth decimal place. The goal is to develop useful models, especially in drug development. The questions which a drug development team face are, for instance, should I dose a drug once a week or once in 2 weeks? This is a it may seem like a simple question, but it's a very important question because it has a lot of implications on how the product is produced, how the patient experiences it, what is the final efficacy of the patient, etc. So, in order to answer that question, should I take this drug once a week or once in 2 weeks? There are several, facts that we have to layer. One of the simple things is what is the half life of the drug? If I take that pill or take that injection, how long is the drug going to stay in my plasma, and what will that look like? The second thing is, if that drug is going after some cell in your body, for instance, and if that cell has a certain life cycle, maybe that cell has a life cycle of every 30 days. So then the question is, hey, how will my drug and its half life of 3 days interact with this cell who has a turnover time of 30 days? So in the absence of mathematical model, you just have to guess. What would you use to guess the answer for this? You just have to, people try to hold all these facts in their head. They look at last past data and then they can come up with a solution. But a much more rigorous way to do it is, even if the model is inaccurate, a much more rigorous way to do it is to layer all of this in some sort of mathematical framework and then ask the question, hey, what is the ideal dose to keep this cell under a certain threshold, for instance? So, coming back to your question, yes, biology is complex. Yes, some biologists who've spent a lot of their time really in particular pathways, their understanding of the utility of mathematical modeling, may come with some skepticism. But in the both in academic and in the real world of drug development, models are very useful. Models give you the first pass. Models give you a way to put in all your first pass hypotheses and give you a way to figure out which of those options are ideal and what you should go ahead with. And here's the other thing as well, right? Like all mathematical models, if there is a prediction, then the right thing to do is test it with a trial and see if the model has a correct answer, in which case the reliability of the model increases, and then you can use it for other situations as well. So I'll pause a bit, but basically the flavor that I wanted to give was there are real life problems which have layers of dynamics and interaction baked into it, which can be which can, making it into a model is not the hard part. Making it into a, reliable model, that's the secret sauce of what we do. And then, they are very, very useful in the drug development process.
So if I can understand, essentially what you are saying is that, okay, I am dealing with a complex systems which I know already very complicated and lots of unknown. So rather than just doing hundreds of search, opening a hundreds of search path with your, without any informed, logically guessed thing, it is much better that you use a mathematical model which
Mhm.
reduces your search space to small.
Correct.
And you then, so your model is not just educated guess, it is a
Correct.
logical guess. In a way, math is essentially logic, so you are using logic, and that way you are reducing the variabilities and different other diversities in the problem, and you are becoming more focused, so the success rate will be obviously higher in this
Yeah, you said it even better than I could. You reduce the search space, so that automatically means your process is more efficient. And so you have better chance of success. You have better shots on goal, so to speak, that you can take. So, absolutely correct. Reduction of the search space and improving the odds of success.
Yeah, I think in general, actually, in the overall community of complexity science, where biology, starting from fluid dynamics to ecology to finance, everywhere, everybody accept that you cannot expect that the precision, the point prediction that is common in classical physics that cannot
Hmm.
apply in a complex system studies.
Correct.
We can actually give a window of opportunity. So I may not exactly predict when the financial market will crash, but I can tell my investors that see, there are signs it can crash sometime in this window. Be careful. The same thing you are doing for biopharma industry, I believe.
Correct, correct. And like all things, the more reliable data and knowledge that you have, the more reliable your prediction can be. But even in the context of very little data and knowledge, still putting it together in a model, even if the error bar of the prediction is wide, it can still narrow what you would have otherwise come up with.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's right. So that issue, that obviously it is just the what we call cycle of science, that you have some observation, you build models. We we prefer to say everything in science is actually model, right? We are trying to create model. Then based on that, you create a experiment, get data. The quality of data helps to improve the model, improve the theory further. So nowadays, every kid in our campus is very excited about AI ML. I believe every other educational campuses are also. Every bright kid want to go into that. There's a buzzword, and sure, like many other industry, biopharma and life science industries also must have been beaten by AI ML, right? And how do you think this AI ML is affecting your niche area of quantitative and mathematical work? Because I think your selling point is always mechanistic models, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not statistical model. Not
Mm-hmm.
I will not expect you that I will dump my clinical data and you will create me nice plots. That's not your
Mm-hmm.
job. You create
Correct.
mechanistic models, right?
Correct.
So how are you co-opting AI ML? Are you doing that, and how do you think it will help us, this physics or mechanism driven modeling?
Yeah. So yes, AI ML is super exciting. I am definitely excited about it. I think many of your listeners may know that drug development is a notoriously hard thing. It takes 10 years and $1 billion to get one successful drug out, order of magnitude. And it takes lots of people and lots of time. And on the other hand, it is a very meaningful and impactful thing to do, because at the end of the drug development process, there is someone whose pain you reduce, or whose life you increase, whose lifespan you increase. So it is important that we use the best tools available and make our process smarter and more efficient. So definitely, I think that sense of optimism for what we can do better and smarter, and maybe in a less biased manner with AI and ML, is definitely there. So the question that you asked, right? There's two layers to ask that question, and I think you did ask it that way. The first layer is my own field. Today, if I build a mathematical model of sepsis, will it take me 5 years like it did during my PhD, or will I be able to do it in 5 months? Because I can use LLM to extract the data quickly. I can use some sort of NLP to interact with the model. I can use ML approaches to do parameter identification, or really calibrate the model a little quicker. The iteration cycles can be faster using ML. So everything that we do today, we are investigating and we are trying out various solutions. Everything that we do today, we can do a little more smartly, a little more efficiently using AI and ML approaches. The one question that I often wonder about is, this is a very useful way to think about drug development, and yet I feel like we should have even bigger impact than what we're having today. This is mathematical modeling in drug development. But a lot of time the bottleneck is, it's difficult to build these models. It takes like three, four PhDs, 5, 6 months to come together to build a model. So if there's any way we can do it faster, we will. And in those ways, we do want to adopt AI. The next layer that you were asking is, listen, if this starts making things very easy, you don't even need a model. You can just black box something and get out solutions much faster. These specific approaches like biostats and bioinformatics and dynamical modeling, you don't have to do. You can just come up with a drug. That may happen at some distant future. But I feel like today, the couple of things I'd be wary about in most complicated processes like drug development, I don't think that change will be a step change like that. Whatever processes we're doing now, we'll start to do them smarter and faster using AI. And then, but we'll still be doing all of those processes to go from discovery to getting an approved drug out in the market. That's the first part. The second part is there are some things very inherent to drug development. One is that biology, though we know a lot, there is a lot that we don't know. So anything like an LLM, which is reliant on knowledge and data that is already collected, is in its way limited because we don't understand all of biology. Just yesterday we were there's a news article about there being potential another system of circulation in the body. So there's a lot of things left to discover in biology. So relying merely or purely on data collected so far and not using human creativity to kind of do more experiments in the real world, will be limiting. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is drug development has to be a transparent science. So that is sometimes the reason why people come to mechanistic modeling, because maybe you can use a statistical model to say, hey, here's a drug A, here's a drug B. If you combine it, like some people did, you can interpolate a little bit. But what mechanism allows you to do is to really understand, okay, how do these two combine? Upstream of those are there common pathways, downstream of those are there common pathways, are they truly orthogonal pathways that go after the disease? So mechanism really allows you to ask and answer these questions. The ethical implications are, for instance, a lot of times drugs are dosed based on a person's gender or race or something like that. So, what we don't want to do is to come up with systems that we don't understand, black box systems, which may have captured some of the biases that are already existing, and use those to come up with, recommendations for how humans should be treated. I think without a white box understanding of why something is happening, I think it's ethically ambiguous. So, we should have white box models and not black box models. I think it's possible that we will get explainable AI models in the in the near future, but till we are able to do that, I feel like we should embrace the complexity of mechanism, because when you make high stakes decisions involving people's lives, you have to at least have a reasonable sense of why we're making that decision.
This brings me to another buzzword. AIIML is a buzzword. Another buzzword across all academic institutions and campuses is startup. And you must have noticed over the years when you came and started your company, situation has changed for good, I will say.
I would say, too, yeah.
And the ecosystems has improved for startups. Now even a first year kid also imagine and try to do something to build something, right? So um, I think many students across all engineering campuses are actually very excited that they want to build something themselves and they want to take the challenges. Many institution has now institutional processes to help them financially, academically, expertise by the right. So, as you are an entrepreneur yourself, uh, do you see that there is a scope to develop new organization, new companies, startups in such niche area of quantitative biology, mathematical modeling in biology? Do you see that in future in India? I'm not saying in abroad. In India, that those type of thing can has an opportunity so that we can actually, with some confidence, tell our students that okay, if you're interested in biology, good in math, why don't you try?
Absolutely. I think there are, and there will be more even. I think there are high tech startups in healthcare and the intersection of life science and engineering, and space. There is a lot of very high tech startups everywhere in India, and it's a wonderful thing to see. Based on my own experience, the one thing that I think you need to embrace generally, but even as an entrepreneur, is not just tolerance to failure, but kind of being able to embrace failure and learn from it. So, most startups will fail, but I think we should stop thinking of fail as a bad word and know that, challenging ideas have to be tried and there will be tweaks. So, from your failure, somebody else will learn, and you need to learn from your failure and other people's failure as well, so that the next idea will be a little smarter. And the problems that we're trying to tackle are difficult problems, energy, or solar, or biology. These are difficult problems, so there is no embarrassment or shame in failing, so that's an important thing to embrace. The second thing I'll say is, in my experience, I feel working being in the workforce for a few years. Maybe it's 4 years for you, maybe it's 6 years, maybe it's 10 years. I was in the workforce, if you count my PhD, for about 10, 12 years before I started Vantage. I think what that allowed me to do is to really understand how that whole industry, and I'm learning every day still, but it allowed me to understand how the business of drug development works, who are the various players, what are the expertise they come with. And then when you craft a solution, you go at it with a much more informed point of view. So then your solution is likely to be targeted to a need that exists. So while it's exciting that you can jump into an entrepreneurial journey right after college, I also, if you aren't doing that, and if you're in a workforce, remember that that's also an opportunity to keep learning and identifying the big problems that need to be solved. I think those are the questions you asked, right? I don't know if I.
Largely. So another question comes to me in my mind in this regard is that, okay, so I have a couple of other guests earlier also who works in biopharma industry, and I personally has education in biopharma, so I understand largely how this modeling and biostatistics are important in biopharma industry. But apart from biopharma industry, there are other verticals in life science industry also, right? As a business leader, do you see there are opportunities to build startups and using mathematical modeling as their powerhouse in those other verticals of our life science industry also?
For sure. So I'll give you a couple of examples. I'm very much deeply buried in drug development. So this is before anything happens. But really, a lot of healthcare is at the delivery layer, right? When a person is examining, what is going on with them, and they go to a doctor and they take a drug, etc. So I think there are a lot of applications in healthcare. One very obvious thing is, hospital data management. Hospitals are notoriously bad in being able to manage the volume of data that they get, but it is a treasure house, because so many people across so many years, across so many illnesses, and multiple illnesses, they all come to hospitals. So being able to gather the data in a way that it can be processed so that we can learn something both epidemiologically and potentially mechanistically, I think that's a big unsolved problem, not just in India, everywhere. The second sort of thing, I think that where we have to be careful, but I think the opportunity is big, is in personal healthcare. And I think one of the big topics of discussion today is weight loss. And I think it's true that in prosperity, as economies get prosperous, increasing weight can lead to metabolic complications. So there are many kind of blockbuster drugs going after weight. There's also lifestyle modifications that you can do for weight. And there's some very good mathematical models, physics-based models, that can track how weight changes based on the calories you take in and the calories you expend. So definitely, in that kind of personalized healthcare, it's very possible to come up with models on the back end and apps which interact with the person, and add on a layer of motivation and coaching, and that's definitely can be an excellent tool. And I think this is not mathematical necessarily, but I think there are some good apps for applications like de-addiction, or people that struggle with ADHD. So just apps which kind of touch the person, the last end of that healthcare journey, where they really are able to improve an individual's life. I think there is a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yes, I think this now every other person is wearing a smartwatch, and these
Correct.
smartwatch companies are gathering a huge amount of data. Possibly somebody can harvest that data and create a beautiful model for
Correct.
personal health thing, right?
Correct.
And possibly somebody is doing also maybe.
Well, I'm sure.
So
I'm sure. Yeah,
yeah,
but these are challenging problems. Again, this is not a problem that one person in one company is going to solve
we're
completely.
going to solve.
We all have to do it. Yeah.
So there is always an opportunity to actually explore. Yeah, that's
Correct.
right. So now I'll come back. I'll change the gear. So everybody does not want to be entrepreneur, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody want to work in the beaten path, want to a job, but still must something exciting, right? So you must be hiring over the years people, the workforce for your this niche area of work, right? So what type of people with what type of academic background do you usually hire? Is it that they are all from biology background or mathematics background? So what qualities you look into it, so that my audience who are undergraduate or postgraduate
For
student
sure.
can
Yes.
develop.
Yes, definitely look up Vantage website. We have a careers page where there is a more detailed job description than what I'm going to give now. But I'll give you a little bit of a flavor. So, like all things in the real world, life advantage is very interdisciplinary. There is no person, just one kind of person. But broadly, the two, three categories we hire from are the following. One is what we think of as an engineer. So this person has facility with mathematics. They can write equations. They can usually code. They understand optimization algorithms. They can they can do dynamical systems analyses. So, what kinds of background we pick these people from? Usually, we go to engineering colleges during their placement seasons. We are in Chennai, so IIT Madras has been an excellent source of talent for Vantage. But we do go across the country for placement in various schools, in various colleges, as well as through the year we conduct. We try to recruit. We have a test which people write, which is usually a quantitative test to test your skill on, if you're good at modeling, if you understand the maths behind it. The backgrounds that people come from in our engineering stream are, they can be mechanical engineers, chemical engineers, physicists, mathematicians, aerospace engineers. We really are not particular where you learn to model, or what you had modeled before in the past. We really are interested in whether you know to model or not. So whichever background we take people. The second kind of
So
place.
essentially, if I interrupt, in this case, you are actually focusing on whether you are good in logical sense of how mathematical models are built, what are the physical meaning of that equation, and how to analyze that, rather than being a domain expert in that
Not at
sense.
all, not at all. We're not looking for domain experts when we hire for the engineering. And usually dynamical systems is something we definitely look for as well. And I think most engineers, get a flavor of
I've
that in
studied
one
that. Yeah.
course. Yeah. So the other kind of variation is we sometimes hire people right out of their BTech, MTech, and also we hire all the way from PhD to postdoc as well. So again, modelers, but we kind of account for the fact that some people are coming fresh out of a PhD or fresh out of a bachelor's, and some people are coming after PhD and postdoc. Uh, the other kind of person we hire is a biologist. So these are usually people who have masters or PhD degrees, and they have done, biology can be very specific. So while they may start out as a general biologist, they usually have PhDs in immunology, molecular biology, metabolism, cell science, all of those things. And there we have a general test on their aptitude for biology. We often ask them to talk about their research work, their master's thesis, their PhD thesis, and then we often have a little bit of a little test sort of thing where we try to understand their interest and ability to extract information from multiple papers in physiology. So that's the kind of test that we have for the engineering side and the biology side. And The most important thing is once people come into Vantage, we have multiple training modules. So the people that come with with the engineering background, we train them on basics of biology, basics of drug development, pharmacology, what sorts of models exist, and this is an area where there's been a lot of past work. So we train them, we train them on key papers in the literature, key case studies, so that they understand how to apply their skills in drug development. Similarly, for the biologists, we give them a little bit of a flavor of how mathematical modeling works, how drug development works, etc. And together, they come in teams of 2 or 3 people to serve a client in a big pharma or biotech company who has this modeling need. So early in your careers, people are working as scientists and engineers, and as they've spent time, 5 years, 10 years, etc. Advantage, they become project leads and project managers that kind of manage multiple projects and make sure that the interaction and they make sure that the client is getting what they want. So that's kind of what we're looking for in terms of people who come in. When it comes to engineers, we're definitely looking for that quantitative skill, but we're also looking for your curiosity and enthusiasm for
Yeah.
biology. There have been people who have come and like, hey, biology is not really my cup of tea, then this is not a good fit. But there are many, many people who come and say, hey, I used to love biology in 10th grade, but then I had to take, computer science, so I ditched biology. So I'm very grateful to come back to this field. So that mathematical aptitude and interest in biology is what we're looking for in engineers.
Yeah, yeah, that type of student I meet regularly, right?
Oh,
Who never wanted to be biology, but every day, as newspaper, television, every day they see some challenging thing coming up in biology, and disease is part of your life. So everybody is. If you are intelligent, obviously you will ask why the hell corona has happened, right? So there are lots of kids, lots of students who suppose in chemical engineering, data science, computer science, even in our bioscience and bioengineering, who may not be so hardcore biologist at training, but
yeah,
they enjoy. They want to,
absolutely.
discover, learn, right? So I think you assured me in that way. Suppose I'm a BTech chemical engineering
No
who
problem.
want to explore the life science, life as a whole, but I may not have a biology background. But if I am curious, I'm capable in analytical math model, I can try your company where actually
Absolutely.
on the job I can learn the basic biology that I required to communicate and
Absolutely.
understand the system, right? So I think that that's a good way of actually allowing this diverse population to bring to the table.
Yeah, that's very, very hard to get. If you limit your company to just people who've exactly done this computation biology, it's very hard to grow a company, right? There's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
not, so
In
this has
other
been
way
excellent.
also, in other way also for the person who is coming, it is also I
Yeah,
think better to be bit multidisciplinary, open to hundreds of other things because
correct,
you never know where your career takes you.
correct.
Right? You want a
Absolutely.
new something new comes, you want to jumpstart and try there. So it is better to be flexible and not rather than very domain specific in that sense.
Absolutely. And as people grow in their careers, and you may, know this yourself, right? If you're a professor or if you're running a company, there is commerce involved. You need to understand, who's paying you money for what. So it's not like you can just be a scientist and just be a scientist. There is art and business involved. You have to say your story to other people. There's marketing involved. So this kind of when educational systems come, they seem very rigid. In 10th standard you take arts, science, or commerce, but the world doesn't work like that. The world is not siloed like that. It's all mixed up, and you have to make your own path. So definitely, what as long as you have an aptitude for what we're doing, what exact route you take to come to any job, including Vantage, should not be a limitation.
Okay, if I understand, I mean, all these things brings me to a very something in my mind that so you had a long journey where a young kid started her journey to understand the world in through the eyes of physicist. You did physics, right? And now you are in a situation where you are trying to understand life, living systems through maths and physics, the skill you develop, and over the year, the biology you have learned in the process, right? So now, if you go back to your undergraduate college, I think it is in Madras, right?
Correct.
And
Still, yes.
meet is the new, first year undergraduates in the canteen, and they chat with you. So, what will be your suggestion to them? That how do you think you will put forward to them that they should also try something to do to understand the living systems?
What a wonderful question. I really appreciate it. I think the world is very different from when I was an undergrad. I think there's information and knowledge and ability to understand what's going on in various parts of the world at their fingertips. I went to undergrad from 1994 to 97, so very long time back. The internet was not yet there. So to me, I feel like if you're curious today, um, all the way from YouTube videos to Coursera courses to courses offered by IITs and NPTEL and the big Harvards and Stanfords. There's just so much information out there. The problem may be reverse of what I had. When I was an undergrad, information was hard to get. So
Now we
today,
have problem of plenty.
the problem the undergrad may face today is overwhelmed by information and choice. So to me, I think the advice that I would give is, be curious, learn from what is available in the world, trust your gut, and don't be scared of failure. Because I think a lot of times what kids at that age worry about is, hey, what if this is the wrong thing that I do? So I feel like being open to kind of go with your gut and then understand where the path takes you. And if it's not the right thing for you, be flexible and resilient enough to change things. That's an important skill. But apart from that, in particular for a career in biology, I would say, keep your eyes open for knowledge and, courses and rigorous courses and, information that comes in from the news, what's happening in the AI ML world. All of those things, you have to start forming a framework, and then without getting overwhelmed, go where your nose takes you for what you find really interesting.
Nicely put. In fact, close that loop. You started by saying that, in your life, you had hawks in your journey. And I believe you trusted your gut there and chose
Yeah.
to like that. And in fact, that's what we all, as a parent, as a teacher, I think we all should
For
tell
sure.
the youngsters that, okay, you try, we are with you as long as
Correct.
you are doing the right way. So be curious, try it. I think that's what you are suggesting.
Correct. Correct.
That's a rightly put nice suggestion. This brings us to the end of these almost 15 minutes of conversation that we have with you, Rukmini. Thanks for joining us today in this podcast. I believe my audience will be very excited when listening and listening to your advices and your learning your life journey and understanding how mathematical models are no more any academic fad. They are becoming, commercial products in a way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rukmini.
Thank you, Professor Bose. I really appreciate the opportunity. Good luck to all your listeners.